The most common philosophy or idea about consciousness is the emergentist idea, right? This is the idea that consciousness is rooted in biology, and it's a very late stage part of the evolutionary picture, and that prior to life, or even prior to some mid-stage life, there was no consciousness, and that um, emerges from probably brain activity or some like nerves or something, right? Electrical activity, whatever. Um, and those folks look at, in particular, they look at the panpsychists who believe that consciousness is spread throughout creation and is very low level and is everywhere. The common charge that you'll see sometimes is that they're making the mistake of anthropomorphizing uh, not alive things, right? So if you say that molecules are conscious on some level, they will make the charge that you are making the mistake of anthropomorphizing those molecules, meaning you're taking a characteristic that is unique to humanity and you are projecting it onto things that don't have that characteristic. And the thought or the implication of this charge is that this is a common problem that people make. They tend to assume sameness and they anthropomorphize things. Like they will mention that children do this all the time. Like young children, they're always anthropomorphizing all of their toys and like really believing in making their little things like little people and assuming that they have these conscious lives. And this is a they treat it as sort of a deep-seated psychological fallacy, anthropomorphization, right? Making things that aren't people but pretending that they're people. Now, here's the problem with that. If you actually look at the arc of human knowledge, this is an interpretation. Uh, it's a grand interpretation, and it's up to some debate. But if you look at the arc of how we usually go from ignorance to knowledge, generally speaking, we assume the uniqueness of ourselves and things that are associated with ourselves. So, for example, pre-Copernican cosmology put Earth, which is us, at the center of the universe, and everything else circles around Earth. Um, but then, upon further analysis and further experimentation and taking in more data and stuff, we go from that like exceptionalism, like people are very special, and then we move away from that toward sameness, right? So that we moved from believing that the Earth was very, very unique. We did more analysis, and then we moved towards deciding that the Earth wasn't very unique. Or if you go, we used to also believe that that humans were sort of like godlike, and that they weren't animals, and that there was this distinct level between humans and other animals. But as biology evolved, we let go of that idea, and now we just consider people to be another animal. So that's another example where we started out with a kind of exceptionalism, human exceptionalism. We are different, and then we moved away from that and accepted that we're basically the same as everybody else. So what I'm saying is that in general, more often than not, the arc of wisdom is away from uniqueness and towards commonality. Generally speaking, ourselves and things associated with ourselves have to be brought down to the level of everything around us, and it turns out that we're all the same. And so my point is that when um, when folks make the charge that panpsychists or folks sort of like panpsychists are like giving into the fallacy of anthropormization, and that this is anthropormization is this deep-seated mistake and fallacy that people tend to do, they're wrong. The truth is that usually the deep-seated fallacy that we usually make is believing that we're totally unique, and that's what they're doing. We might as well assume anthropormization. We might as well assume sameness, because that's usually where we end up landing at the end of the day anyway. So in the case of consciousness, it used to be the people that it was thought that only humans were conscious. Nobody even believes that anymore. Now the debate tends to be on what level of life, and there's a lot of debate of maybe it's even below life. And so we are moving away from this kind of exceptionalism and toward what these folks want to call anthropormization. So anthropormization, we should gladly take that as our starting point. Since that's more often than not, that's where we end up landing anyway, why don't we take that as the default position?